I have chosen prompt number 5. To truly understand someone and be able to judge his or her actions, you must first understand their past. I think that this is true in the story of the curious incident of a dog in the nighttime. Here's why. Let's start with Chris's dad. He stabbed his neighbor's dog with a pitchfork. You might think that this is only something a crazy person would do, but if we take a look back at his past, it becomes understandable. His wife left him for the neighbor, Mr. Shears, and Mr. Shears left his wife, Eileen. So Eileen started coming over, checking in, and helping out around the house. Christopher's dad started developing feelings for her and thought that maybe she was returning those feelings, but then they got into an argument where it seemed like Mrs. Shears couldn't deal with Christopher's disability. Chris's dad is very protective of Christopher, looking after him by himself and trying his best to be a good father. So any remark against Christopher, his dad really takes it to heart. As for Mrs. Shears' dog, the victim, he had an operation that made his moods unpredictable. Here's a quote, page 121. And you know what that dog was like after the operation? Nice as pie one moment, sink its teeth into your leg the next. When Mrs. Shears kicks him out of the house, and he sees the dog in front lawn and the pitchfork, and he thinks of how Mrs. Shears would rather live with the dog than him and Chris. Page 121. I think she cared more for that dog than for me, for us. And then he sees the dog coming at him, and he just reacts. We can also infer that Chris's dad has problems controlling his anger. From when earlier in the book, Christopher's dad finds out about the book Christopher's been writing and learns Chris knows about his mom's affair, and he forgets about how Chris feels about touching and gets so enraged that he grabs him, and when Chris hits him to let go, Chris's dad hits back. Page 82. Mother had hit me sometimes because she's a very hot-tempered person, which means she gets angry more quickly and shouts more often. But father had always been a more level-headed person, which means he didn't get angry and he didn't shout as often, so I was very surprised when he grabbed me. From that quote, we can see how when Christopher's mom lived with them, they had a dynamic where he was a calm one and she was a short-tempered one. But after the stress of the past 2 years, things have changed for Christopher's dad. He's more violent and impulsive. Page 122. When that red mist comes down, you know how it is. It's also just been a hard couple of years for Christopher's dad. He's stuck in a lie that his wife died. It was supposed to be an easier way for him to explain what happened to Chris, rather than the truth that she left, which would have been too painful for him to explain and too painful for Chris to understand. Page 114. I did it for your good, Christopher. Honestly, I did. I never meant to lie. I just thought it was better if you didn't know. But it's hurting him a lot to be dishonest every day. He has to be careful not to accidentally reveal the truth. And doing something like that for 2 years can drive someone crazy. Page 122. And it was like everything I'd been bottling up for the past 2 years, just... To reiterate what made Christopher's dad snap, here we got. His wife left, Mrs. Shears rejected him, the dog was being aggressive. He felt that Mrs. Shears did not care about him and Chris. He gets violently angry, and he's been living a lie for the past 2 years. Does it make his actions excusable? No. But you understand why he did it, and you can tell that he's still a good person at heart. He's just really been through a lot. Now for Chris's mom. Why would she leave her loving husband and son? Having a son with autism put a lot of stress on Chris's parents' relationship. They would argue about how best to take care of her son, and a lot of parents have arguments like that. But it was just Christopher's disability added a whole new realm of stress. Christopher's mom loved him, but she got very frustrated when he would have a meltdown in public or would refuse to eat his food, and she just wasn't patient enough to handle it. Page 107. I said that I couldn't take it anymore, and eventually he got really cross and said I was being stupid and should pull myself together. So then she and Christopher's dad got more and more distant because they knew if they talked to each other, it would end in an argument about Christopher. Page 107. And by the end we stopped talking very much because we knew it would end up in an argument and would go nowhere. And then I felt really lonely. Once she started to distance from her husband, she began to develop a relationship with a neighbor, Mr. Shears, who was also having relationship problems with his wife. She felt guilty for betraying her family and started to feel like a burden. She saw how Christopher was much calmer around his dad than with her, and she thought about how she wasn't helping her family, just making situations worse. And Christopher would lose it, she would lose it, she wasn't able to calm him down. She only got more upset and violent, which made Christopher even more upset, and it would just escalate. She felt that she was only dragging her family down and making more work for her husband. He now had to calm down both her and Christopher. Page 109. And I think that was when I realized that you and your father were probably better off if I wasn't living in the house. Then he would only have one person to look after instead of two. Once she left, her husband wouldn't let her come back to see Chris, thinking that once she left, she forfeited her right to see Christopher, thinking that if she wanted to see her family, she wouldn't have left them. Christopher's mom might seem heartless for leaving her husband and disabled son for the neighbor, but if we take a look into her past and what she was feeling, you see that she's a woman who loves her son, but just feels like she's impeding him and is mentally unable to cope with her home situation. Page 216. The doctor gave her pills to take every morning to stop her feeling sad. Lastly, for Chris, why did he disown his dad for making a mistake? Christopher hates lies because they scare him and he doesn't understand them. So he loses all his trust in his dad for telling a big lie. Christopher doesn't understand that his dad loves him and more than anything just wants him to be happy. Christopher just understands what happened. His dad murdered and he could do it again. Christopher doesn't see a difference between dogs and people. He wants justice for Wellington the same way he would for a person, or maybe even more. She, Siobhan, said that it was usually people who were killed in murder mystery novels. She said that this was because readers cared more about people than dogs. Christopher also doesn't see a difference between him specifically and Wellington. He thinks that his father could murder him in the same way, and he becomes very scared of him. Christopher's Asperger's makes it hard for him to understand things the way most people do. He understands math and logical things, people and their intentions. Too confusing for him. Therefore, I believe that the prompt is true. To truly understand someone and be able to judge his or her actions, you must first understand their past. Thanks for listening.